Peace and blessings, family. This is Brother Shareef with the Hour of Power. Go to Hour of Power, Shareef Hamid on YouTube. Subscribe and share so we can continue to lift the mind, body, and soul of our people. Before we get into this much anticipated interview with my special guest here, as always, in the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, we give him praise and thanks for his mercy and his goodness to the human family. If all the trees upon the earth were pens to write with, and if all the oceans were ink, and then another 7 oceans to add to its supply, the writing would still not be enough to explain the glory of God, for he's the exalted, all-powerful, all-wise. We confide in no other in our time of need, and we praise no other in our good fortune. He is one. And even if I lived to be 1,000, it would still not be enough to thank God for his many blessings and gifts. We thank God for the Metu Neter, oracles, scriptures, and writings that came on the continent of Africa thousands of years before any organized religion. We thank God for Moses in the Torah, Jesus in the Gospel, and Muhammad with the Quran. We greet everyone in words of peace. To our Christian family, praise the Lord. To our Muslim family, assalamu alaikum. To our Hebrew Israelite family, shalom. To our Black conscious family, hotep. To our Native American family, peace and blessings. And to our people in the streets, what's good to you? It all means peace. So once again, this is Brother Shareef with the Hour of Power. Go to Hour of Power, Shareef Hamid on YouTube, subscribe and share. Before we get into this much anticipated interview, we always start off the Hour of Power with what we call a nugget of truth. A nugget of truth is just that. It's a historical fact from something in the past or maybe current to open up your eyes to truth and historical knowledge. It's not a lecture, it's just that. As you can see on the screen, there's this week's nugget of truth. It's a man by the name of Lai Ching-zu. This man is believed to live to 256 years old, and he just died in 1933, which is not long ago. It's some discrepancy about his date of birth. Those in the Republic of China said he was born in 1677, which would make him 256 years old if he deceased in 1933. Other reports said he was born in 1736, which at the least would make him 197 years old. He was a herbalist, a martial arts trainer, and a spiritualist. There in China, he joined the China Republic Army at the age of 72. He joined at 72. And they said, why'd you join so late? He said, well, I'm just starting to live. I'm just a young man. To give credibility to this story, the New York Times, which is a credible source, did 2 articles on him in 1929 and 1930. When they did an article on him in 1930, they found records in China showing how China celebrated his 150th and his 200th birthday. Some of his elders in China, one by the name of Master Lu, was taught him different breathing techniques and dietary and exercises that kept him young. And his master teacher, Master Lu, used to go up in the mountains in the Far East, and he was with a hermit, and he said, well, I don't know why y'all are surprised about this, because the hermit that taught me, he's right here, and he lived to 500. So people think this is something far-fetched, but if you read the Bible, a sister just inboxed me, and she asked me if I knew about the prophet Enoch. If you go in Genesis, it's not a religious class, it said Enoch walked the earth and even communicated with God, and so God took him at 350 years old. I don't think it's normal for us to be departing at 40, 50, 60, 70. I believe this is normal to live this old. So that's this week's nugget of truth. You can look it up. His name is Lai Ching-Yuan, and he is believed to live to 256, and he died of natural causes in 1933. So without no further ado, we have 3 special guests this week, a very serious topic. They're going to shed some light. The call-in number is 717-846-5067. You know the Hour of Power is transparent. We're open. But if you do call in with any questions, all I'm asking is that you stick to the topic of the curfew law and how we're going to make York better. Anything else, any gripes or whatever thing you have to save that for another time. Just stick to the topic of what we're talking about tonight. We'll be glad to take your calls and questions. A lot of people inboxed me after my show last week with some concerns, so that's why I reached out to these gentlemen and this young lady to do it. It's for you. This is a TV show. Of course, a TV show is going to cover topics that are trending. That's what TV does. So some people said, well, you're just covering it because it's going to bring you views. Yeah, that's what TV does. That's what TV does. As Donahue, he interviewed some controversial, I'm not saying they're controversial, but he interviewed people who I'm pretty sure he didn't agree with, but he gave them a platform and he gave the people what they wanted. So that's what the Hour Power does. So without no further ado, ladies always first, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Alana Barnes, and I am a mother of 4 boys and a wife, and I'm also a high school counselor at William Penn Senior High School. And thank you for having me.
Okay. And your position, just so people know?
Yes, I'm a high school counselor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at
All right.
William Penn High School.
Okay.
And I basically I just commented on a post that the mayor or maybe another person posted about the curfew. Just an idea or just something that I've remembered, regarding the curfew violations and how they responded to curfew enforcement some years ago when I worked in a different position. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your name, sir?
Yeah, I'm Chief Banker of the York City Police Department.
Okay. And native of
Yep,
York?
I grew up York and
Wow.
I came back. I live in York now.
Wow. And I've heard a lot of good things about you. And I think
Thank
I
you.
met you with the street. Is it
Street
the
soldiers,
walk?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, over Shiloh Baptist Church, yeah.
Yeah, we was walking the street out West End, trying to inform the people about violence and different things like that, and trying to get their feedback. Okay, and I think y'all know this guy here.
Michael Helfrich, I'm the mayor of York.
Yes.
How y'all doing?
And you're a native of York?
I grew up outside of York, but my dad's from, excuse me, my dad's from the city. My mom's from Germany, and they moved out about '68, and I moved back in 2001.
Okay.
So my blood's from here.
Okay. All right.
Lifelong resident myself too. So.
Well, we're not going to belabor the point. Some time ago, not too long ago, I remember seeing your interview last week, I believe, on your Monday message. But before that, I'd seen things on Facebook about a curfew law that's going to be not really enacted because it's always been here. Y'all shed more light on that. But after your interview there, I did a show last week, and some parents started calling in, was a little concerned because I do believe it's some layers to it. Isn't just it's a curfew, but I wanted to bring the most credible people on so we could address the concerns of the people and the youth and how it will affect York City and hopefully the benefits of it. So could you tell us, either one, what kind of sparked the need to bring it back, so to speak?
Well, let me start with what we have already. So we've had a curfew as far back as anybody can remember, and in 2008 they rewrote the curfew law. There was an effort to enforce the curfew at that time. Then we dropped off a bit in manpower, I believe, is the story that I get from the police department, and it was still on the books, and every once in a while it was used, but it was enforced less and less. Last year, with the help of Chief Bankert, we were able to bring on 12 new police officers, increase the force, and we actually had enough folks to start to look at the curfew and how we might be able to use that to reduce the amount of juveniles that are victims of crime and are actually committing crimes. I know the chief has the stats, but about 50% of our violent crimes have been either committed by or both actually.
Correct.
50% have been committed by juveniles, and 50% the victims have been juveniles. I'm sure, sadly enough, over the last 3 years, we've had juveniles killed in multiple corners of the city. And Chief, what is the statistic for what happens between 10 and, is that 50%?
Well,
Or no?
the majority of all of our shootings, whether they're non-fatal or homicides, or even if it's just a shooting of a car, no one actually gets hit, the majority of those are during the actual curfew times of 11 o'clock at night to about 3 in the morning. Curfew times are 11 at night till 5 in the morning, or 6 in the morning. But most of our shootings, whether it's a non-fatal shooting, someone gets hit and they're murdered, or if it's a shooting at a house or shooting at a car, the majority of those happen at the same time of the same hours of the curfew. So then
Said after 10.
after 10, yeah, but the curfew is 11 to 6, so it's really like 10 or 11 to about 3 in the morning. And then we found out through our group violence initiative, which allowed us to gain more statistics and to address the gun violence specifically, that half, or just slightly more than half, of all of our victims are under 18, and all of our suspects are under 18. So I felt that once we had the appropriate manpower to where we weren't going from call to call, and we have a specific GVI unit now that is part of our community response and our group violence initiative response on the law enforcement side, I felt it irresponsible not to enforce the curfew law, not to specifically enforce it, because if you do nothing, you get nothing. And if I know that the kids are the majority of the victims and the offenders, and I have a tool to get them off of the streets, then I think I should use that tool. So the beginning of this year is when we started seeing the effects of the 12 new officers, because it takes about a year to train them all. So our operational numbers came up. So we were able to put some officers on patrol. And so now we use their what we call unobligated time to do certain details. And then the group violence initiative detail is specifically geared towards both support and outreach and law enforcement. So now towards the end of the beginning of summer, we see more of the kids out. So we started seeing more details, and we see more contacts related to curfew.
And before we go any further, just to make it clear, because I think quote unquote misnomer is that I hear a lot of people saying, well, why was it taken off of the books? It was never.
No.
It was never taken off of the
No.
books. It just wasn't.
The resources
enforced.
weren't there to enforce it, right? So the resources weren't there, for one. And two, we didn't have, before the group violence initiative, we started this 3 years ago, we didn't know that the statistics is what we know now. Part of what the group violence initiative does is it allows us to collect that data, guides us to collect specific data, so that our enforcement is related to real things that we know is happening. So as we gain information of the times of day, the days of the week, the areas that are specifically targeted, and the persons is what we're focusing on here. It allows us to identify that, and it was surprising to us, 50% of both the victims and the suspects were under 18. So we use all the tools we can, because we don't want them dying. You know, I felt it was irresponsible for me not to use a tool given to law enforcement to save our kids from getting shot and killed. So once I had the resources to do it, which the mayor and city council allowed us to do in 2018 and 2019, they became operational, I used that tool to help reduce some of these shootings. And so far this year we have a 26% reduction in shootings, and we have over a 60% reduction in homicides. I don't think that's a coincidence either.
What do you think happened that it was a lack of manpower, because violence ain't just start in York, especially amongst youth?
Lack of manpower for the police department? Well, we had a financial crisis there several years ago. So when you go, and we lost officers through attrition, through time, through as they retire. So over a 2 or 3 year period, we lost a series of officers. And then there was a hiring freeze, or very low hiring. And then when you start to hire and you're down 20%, you don't just hire 20 officers and all of a sudden they're there. It has to be over time. So we started coming back in 2016 and 2017, and we had a large number of officers retire in 2018. I confronted, I informed the mayor, the new, right, I mean, it was like first month.
Yep.
I said that we're almost there. We're starting to come back from the attrition from, I think it was 13, 14, and 15. We had some budget problems. Through the attrition, we started hiring, but 2018 was going to be a big year. Actually, we've hired a total of 18 since you've been hired. But that first year was a big push of 12 because we had 12 officers who were slated to retire. So I have to hire them ahead of time because it takes almost a full year to get them trained.
Which is something that we are doing differently now
Yeah.
than they did before. So
Yeah.
now we are anticipating when people are going to retire, and we're bringing them on earlier so that they can get that year of training and be ready.
Correct.
When the other person retires. So we've diminished that gap of coverage, and that's given us more folks on the ground.
Yes.
And Miss Barnes, it was. I know you have had some participation in this before. I believe back in 2008. You want to talk about that to show that it's always been there. It's just as Chief Bankert explained, it was a lack of manpower. What role did you play with enforcing the curfew, or role to make it work for the community before?
Well, what I did was, at that time, I worked for the York County Mental Health Department, and we actually were given the dates when they would do the curfew sweeps. So they would actually pick a date in a month, usually like a Friday, and they would do curfew sweeps. And then what they would do is they would reach out to the Human Services Department. So Human Services consists of like mental health, intellectual disabilities, children and youth services, and then they would also reach out to the Juvenile Probation Office. So we would have all of these agencies together, working with the police department. And also, we would also work with a community resource. At that time, we worked with Crispus Attucks, and we would go to Crispus Attucks, and we would all meet there. So when the police officers would bring the youth in, they would come to Crispus Attucks instead of going to the police station. And then they would contact the parents, and then we actually would meet with the youth. So we had our laptops set up so we could sit down with them, see if they were involved in any of the services, like if they were involved in children and youth or probation. We could see that then, and then talk with that youth and find out why were they out in curfew, out past curfew, and what they could possibly get from that service. So if, for instance, I was sitting down with the youth and I'm talking with them, and I found out they're in, mental health, they have, some mental health disorders there, and I could follow up with them later, So just to have another point of contact. And also, to me, it felt like less of a hit to them, for them to come to a community resource center or a community center instead of the police, the police department. I thought that, to me, kind of lessened the blow of being picked up for curfew violation. Although they knew what they were doing, they knew they were wrong for being out that late. But at times, some youth don't think there's a problem with it. I would meet with the kids, and like I was just going to get something to eat, right down the street from my house. So, and that, they wouldn't get in trouble. They would just, be told, you're getting a warning, you're not supposed to be out this late. And at times there were some issues, like I said, we would have agencies there, and I think that in that case, it was good for the youth to be picked up, because then they could be serviced then, if they needed a place to stay, then we could help them.
Okay.
So Alana posted about this, and that's when, some folks were posting about different issues with the curfew, because the enforcement had kicked up. Summer started, so there were more folks to get picked up, more young folks. And that's when we started really looking at what was happening with the curfew enforcement, and then learning about, because I didn't know about that, learning about what had been done 10, 11 years ago. So now we're in a phase, and also the law says that you have to be with a parent or guardian, which has always been interpreted by both law enforcement and the justice system as your legal guardian. Well, we know that in the 21st century, families are more complicated than that.
Right.
And you've got babysitters involved. You've got parents working third shift, leaving the kid, leaving the 14-year-old with a 19-year-old or something like that. So we started looking at how we might be able to change this law, which is very, very restrictive, and see if there's a way to adapt the law, and then also see if we could include some of this implementation. So we're in discussions right now. I actually submitted some changes to the law today to City Council. So again, if you want the law to stay as it is, then the enforcement that you're going to get is that only a parent or legal guardian can be out with a minor between 11 and 6 o'clock. No exceptions. That's what the law says. What I'm looking at is that a guardian could be an individual 18 years of age or older, either authorized by the law or a written statement from the authorized parent or guardian that includes the name of the parent, the name of the minor, the name of the authorized guardian, and the phone number of the parent or legal guardian. So that way, when an officer stops someone and the 14-year-old is with a 20-year-old, that 20-year-old is in possession of a paper that says, hey, my mom works at night, she allows me to have them. We were going to McDonald's to grab something late because he was hungry. You know, something like that. Something, or a babysitter that is 19 is driving across the city and with a 12-year-old and they have a tail light out, or a 16-year-old, whatever it might be. Some things are obvious, you know, like if you've got a 12-year-old that's with somebody, that's a little more obvious that they're not doing anything potentially wrong. 19 and 16-year-old, now you get a little bit more troubled years. And but you've got a piece of paper that says, here, I'm supposed to be with him, call his mom and his mom will confirm. So this is what I've come up with so far, what we've all been talking. I've been listening to a lot of different people, trying to figure out how we could make something that works for 21st century families. So that's where we're at right now. This is what I've submitted to City Council.
When is this supposed to
Well,
go?
so first what I need, if people want to change the law from legal guardian and parent only to something that is broader, then they have to talk to their city council people and get the city council to, first of all, introduce this, which I'd like to introduce it on July 16th. Otherwise, we have to wait till August 20th, and the changes can't be made until September. But we need city council people to be behind these changes. So you can talk to your city council folks, and that's what we really need the most of right now. We need agreement.
But let's try to get to the meat of it, because I know Chief Banker and Ms. Barnes, they have limited amount of time. So the community members, and if you want to call in, the call-in number 717-846-5067. Stick to the topic, please, if you do call in. So the community has to reach out first to the city council to see if they want to change the wording, so to speak, of it. Is there any planned city town hall meetings? Because that was one of my main concerns, to reach out to the community to say, hey, this is what we're looking at. Is there any training, you know, for the police officers? Because I'm just thinking as a black man, just being straight up and being honest, I could just see something with maybe some youth out. They may be 18 or 19, which is legal, but you know, officer may not know. So what's the approach? Is there any like training of how would that role play? How would that, you know, play out? How would they approach them? They put the lights on and say, hey, pull over. Or if they're walking, like what's the procedure if it's perceived that someone is out? What if they don't have their paper that the mayor is proposing? That
Well, if
could
they're
be
18, if they're 18 or 19, they don't need a paper.
Okay, but what if what's the procedure if, I mean, I'm a small guy. I mean, what
I
if
mean,
someone
if you
looks
look younger than 18,
right?
right?
Right.
But you may not be.
How
You're not
is
a
it-
minor, but you look like you're something.
Will
Well,
they
let
be-
me tell you actual numbers and what our actual experience is. We have 58 arrests than for this year. This is up about 1,500% from any other year because we didn't have the resources, right? So it's a significant increase from any other year. And the arrests that we're making are come from vehicle stops. So the vehicle stops comes from a violation of the vehicle code. Has nothing to do with you looking young or not. Comes from vehicle accidents. Has nothing to do with you looking young or not. Runaways. The runaways get caught for it. And then other encounters related that we're called to that are drug related. Those are the incidents that we're talking about in the 58. So we don't see a lot of that, what you're talking about, but the purpose, but the scenario there that you're talking about is if an officer goes and he sees someone who appear to be a child or younger 18, but it's not. And that is just a person stop. We call it a person stop. And there is no additional training needed for any of that. If an officer believes that crime is afoot, what that means is, does the officer have articulable facts that says that a crime is occurring or is about to occur, he may stop you. That's called reasonable suspicion. And that is just like, hey, sir, can you hang on a second? I'm stopping you because how old are you? And first question is going to be, how old are you? If he thinks he's only stopping you because he thinks you're too young, so how old are you? And what would you say? Your age, right? And you say, oh, I'm 18. So, well, you look a little younger. Let me see your ID. That would be the appropriate response from the police officer. The appropriate response from the young man would be, no, I'm 18. I'm allowed to be out. Well, let me see your ID. He gets his ID out. If he doesn't have his ID, there's other ways we can identify you. Where's your identification number? What's your date of birth? We can check to see if you actually have one. We now have, on most vehicles now, we can see the driver's license picture right in the vehicle, so we can verify that. So not even having your ID, which you don't have to have while you're walking on the street, is still a way for us to verify. So that is a good scenario of an encounter by a police officer and a good encounter by the person being stopped.
But you had
But
mentioned,
but life is a lot easier if you carry an ID.
It is.
I
is.
appreciate the law says you don't have to have one. That's fine, but it's a matter of you waiting around until the police do all their research. It's a lot easier to just show an ID and be on your way. So while it's not legally required, please, if you have one, carry it with you. It's a convenience.
we do have a caller. Caller, state your name if you want to and your question.
Hello?
I believe we have a caller. The caller can hold on. We'll.
You must have lost him.
Hello, this is David Whittle.
Can you speak up?
Yes, this is David Whittle. I can hold.
No, you're on the air. What's your question? Thanks for calling in.
Sure, thanks. Appreciate all of you in attendance at the show. Kind of, I hope, what you said, and try to get clarity here. Remember back in the 60s or 70s when you had, I guess, connections with community members that are willing to play a part in an event like this where there are teens that are out in public and shouldn't be out at a certain time and things may look suspicious and, things might be, what they seem or they might not be. I think what you're saying, part of the approach in that type of scenario that you guys are talking about is very important because, the approach of any officer is intimidating. That late, whether it's in a dark alley or just at a store, is intimidating. Not all young kids know how to carry themselves, which they should, in a manner where it's respectful when they approach. Not all officers are bad. Not all officers are racist. There is that quiet elephant in the room where some might not have had training in certain types of communities where it is fearful because you don't know what to expect. So I believe a component that's a possibility, the community also has to get involved, whether it's the parents that have more insight of their neighborhood and pretty much knows what's going on, who are the bad apples and who are the good apples, I think needs to be a pivotal part played by the communities, or whether they're churches or your Boys and Girls Club or whatever it may be. I think that's an important part to tie into it. If it's intimidating, unfortunate with the trending reality of being pulled over by officers. They have to be on the defense because they don't know what they're dealing with. And, unfortunately, numbers are still raised for unfortunate African, Black American youth or men where it's been mishandled. Let's just be obvious and, to the point. What is your strategic approach to tie with the community and try to make the approach a little bit more seldom, not intimidating, not so much as far as stopping a car? Kids, just like a Trayvon Martin kid, just walking to the store with a hoodie on. He's profiled real quick. Maybe he's a little fearful and scared. Reaches in his pocket for a cell phone, mom, being pulled over or something. What is the strategic approach of these officers who are going to be footing this and stepping into this role?
All right, thanks for your question, sir. Officer Banker, Chief Banker.
Yeah. We have, I have noticed, and I share this with the organizations that I go to very frequently, like the street soldiers, like you mentioned, confronting racism, the clergy and chiefs, the Black Ministers Association, anyone that'll have me. I never say no to someone who invites me into their home or business. And I tell them this, and I say that the evolution of an officer's approach is exactly that. It is an evolution. So the officer that is brand new, we had 18 new officers since Mayor Helfrich came on, okay? Almost all of them are now on the street. Those officers have been inundated with training for a full year. They have to remember a lot of things. And what happens is they don't see their approach this way, but I see it this way because I remember being new, is that it is robotic, right? So when you are robotic, it becomes an impersonal encounter, right? So I'm speaking to you like we're having a conversation, right, Shareef? You told us that that's the way we're going to have this conversation. And that's not the way it's approached, because when they go and they talk, or they stop a car, or they stop a person, or even when someone calls them, they're looking at making sure they get the right information. They're making sure no one's following them, or they're safe, everyone else is safe. There's so many things in their head that they're not used to. Their approach becomes an impersonal, robotic, mechanized kind of response. And that just makes the person being stopped, being spoken to, whether it's the victim or the offender or someone being stopped, as, well, this guy doesn't care about me, this guy isn't being personable with me, I'm just another person. So the way we've gotten away from that, and when we do that right after they get out of the academy into our field training, and the way I express it to them, and when we get them to a point to where their conversations start out as a personable just conversation, is I say, talk to everybody like you want a police officer to speak with your mother. If you believe that you are speaking with someone you know's mother, or how you think you want your mother to be spoken to by a police officer, that kind of gives them an approach towards the conversation. In addition to that, we have a robust field training. Once they get out of the academy, we give them a week, and we have 24 weeks of supervision with an officer in that car. And we try to get them to the point to where it's not so robotic and it's more of a personal conversation. Because once it becomes, once you get, like David had said, some young people don't know how to respond to that. And then if they up it, officer gets ups it. They up it, we up it, and then it gets out of hand. It doesn't need to be. So if the officer then becomes more personable from the beginning, it alleviates that. And
you had mentioned that a reason to pull someone over or approach them is if it's a suspicion of something illegal going on. Well, what if you for just walking down the street? That's not illegal. So what would be the...
Well, the officer has to have an articulable reason to stop you. That's reasonable suspicion.
Right. So what if they're just walking down the street? What's the suspicion?
They shouldn't be stopped.
Oh.
But the officer, you never know what the officer is. So if you're walking down the street, but half a block down the road, someone with a shirt on like you just robbed somebody.
No, we ain't talking. I'm not talking. My question isn't about them doing anything. Because like the 4th of July, I was out and about. I saw plenty of youth out past 11 o'clock. And this interview just came to my mind, and all things came to my mind. Like, well, they could be pulled over, but they weren't doing anything wrong. They were just out and about. So if they're just out and about, 3, 4 youth, and they're just walking down the street, what would be the reason?
If they're out and about past 11, they're violating the curfew ordinance.
But how do you know that? How do you know that they're doing? How do you know that they're not of age? And if they're not doing nothing wrong, what's the reason?
If they appear to be under the age of 18,
So you have the right to.
that's reasonable suspicion. It's reasonable, right? So it's reasonable. Now, if you're not going to stop me, you know, because I'm under, because you think I'm under 18, if it's reasonable, that's the legal standard. If it's reasonable that the officer believes that you're under 18, and he stops you, says, "Hey, Shareef, how old are you? I'm stopping you. I think you might be under 18. How old are you?" He goes, "No, I'm 18. I'm 19." He verifies it. When he verifies that you're 18 or 19, that's the end of it, right? That's the end of it. If you're 17,
So let's say
then
he's
you're
18. He's 18. He or she's 18 or 19. You get their ID. Will you run a missile on them?
Yes.
What if they have a warrant for their arrest?
Well, then they get arrested for the warrant. Yeah, you're not allowed to have a warrant either.
Right.
That's against the law too.
Okay.
And that happens.
Okay.
So I just saw the time. It's 8:36. I know you're going to the movies.
Yeah.
And, are you going to Quantus Lake?
I am.
Going to Quantus Lake
Yep.
with your boys?
Yep.
All right. So I know that you got to go.
Yes.
Let me keep those just in case. I know we
Give
got
me the
some
one in the middle
statistics
there.
on here. So thank you both.
Thank you so much. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
coming on,
Thank
and
you.
hopefully
Thanks.
we can continue to communicate and keep the dialogue going. I appreciate your insight, and hopefully it'll open up the minds and inform people. I know they may still have questions, but you definitely gave a lot of insight of why it needs to come, especially with those statistics.
Anytime someone asks, I never say no.
We'll definitely have you back
Good.
on in some kind of capacity.
Good.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
Do I want to slide around? So I just, if I may, I wanted to emphasize something that the chief said, because I hear this all the time about the cops being robotic. So I hope folks caught that and understand that, is that when we get new officers, it is potentially is their first day on the job. You know, I mean, they're getting training. They get a year worth of schooling. Then they get 20 weeks worth of training with another officer. But it's like when you're first. So I like to play guitar. When I'm first playing guitar, I've got to think about every move that I'm making with every step. And so if they look robotic, that is because they are robotic. They're trying to be comprehensive and make sure that they're doing everything right, which makes them not look personable. So we're trying our best to get that into their heads and get that into their practices, but I hope that people can understand that, because I get that so much. The officers, particularly the young officers, they're very robotic. I hear that word so many times, and it's just the perfect word for it.
And a couple more quick questions. Again, the call-in number is 717-846-5067. I mean, Our Power is providing a platform for this serious issue. Now, not the time to be quiet. Hopefully, more platforms or dialogues will open up after this, because I believe many layers is to this. What's the limits on this? Is this just York City? Because that's
Yes,
where you're.
this is York. Yeah,
So-
this is York City.
Just real quick, at the bottom of the hill on West Princess, where the Turkey Hill is, would that cut off that limit?
It's just across the street.
Okay.
Yeah, the
So
city
both-
doesn't actually stop at Richland Avenue there. It stops a half a block past Richland Avenue.
Okay.
But yeah, you're in
So-
the right
so,
area. But West York, I believe, has a curfew of their own. Different municipal. You know how Pennsylvania is. Every different little borough and township, they all have their different ordinances.
And if you get cited for it, what's some of the consequences?
In the city?
Yeah. For a
Well,
curfew.
that is actually, so I saw some people on Facebook talking about $1,000 penalty. There's no, here, let me read exactly what it says. So the penalty, the fine for the first offense shall be up to $50. So no more than $50.
Issue to the parent?
It depends. They can do either. If they find a 12-year-old walking around or doing something they're not supposed to, that is likely going to be issued to the parent. If they find a 17-year-old and the parent says they climbed out of the window and I can't control them, well, then that might go on the kid. That's discretionary. So upon the second violation, the fine shall be a minimum of $50 and a maximum of $200. And the cost of prosecution. Upon the third, and again, we didn't write this. This is what we are inheriting here from back in 2008. And the third is a minimum of $100 and a maximum of $1,000 for the third violation or more. Now, but the very next thing says the court, and this is very, very important because the city doesn't decide what the costs, what the penalty is going to be. It's the magistrates that decide what the penalty is going to be. So it says right here, the court is encouraged, when appropriate, to consider counseling and or community service or other diversionary programs as an alternative sentence to the penalties prescribed above. The only reason I want to see this enforced is to save kids' lives and to keep them out of trouble. If one, I will be happy if not one penny comes to the city of York. You know, don't get this wrong. This is not any way to make money. If every district justice gives the kids community service, picking up trash in the neighborhoods, you know, working at the community center, whatever it is, to walk off, to work off.
The magistrates still.
That the magistrate decides that. So I know a few of the magistrates, and I am hoping and would encourage them to give community service. And nobody's trying to pick the pockets of the parents or anything like that. We want to keep kids safe. That's our entire goal. Keep every penny. I do not care. You know. So I see we got some. Do we got somebody in?
Yeah, we have a couple of callers. You want to put the first one on?
Good evening, Mr. Shareef.
Yeah.
Hello, good evening. How you doing? It's Brian Kennedy. I apologize. I couldn't come in.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to, it was more of a two-tier question or statement. The first question is, with the curfew law, Article 737, I think the consequence of if the child is the first consequence is the parent gets $50 fine or something like that. I think that wouldn't be helpful for a parent that is really struggling with the child being defiant. I don't think that would be really helping their situation by fining them. You know, I think that the child should get some type of counseling or something like that to pretty much get the tools that they need.
Well, the mayor said that, the mayor said that if it's like a 12-year-old child, the parent may get it, but if it's like a 15 or 16-year-old child, then the fine, and then if the parent says, hey, I didn't know that they were out or they're being unruly, then the fine may go to the child.
But you might have been calling at the time that I read this last part, because this is one of the most important parts in Article 737. So I'm glad you were checking it out. But 737.99b says the court is encouraged, when appropriate, to consider counseling and or community service or other diversionary programs as an alternative sentence to the penalties prescribed above. So we don't want to be messing with anybody's money. We're not trying to hurt poor people. We want to make kids safe. So we are hoping and encouraging that the judges would consider this this encouragement that is written into the law.
Yes, I understand that. I understand it, and that's good, and that's awesome. However, they still get fines. And the second part is, I was thinking and I was listening, and I think that the curfew law is awesome. However, it's other tools that need to be, or it's other things that need to be done along with that to pretty much ensure that the kids are not getting into the trouble that they're getting into. You know, so what I'm saying is that curfew law is awesome. However, I think it's some other things that need to be done to ensure the safety of these youth.
Well, that's a perfect segue into what we were going to go into second, although we're running out of time. We wanted to talk tonight about some community development stuff that we're working on too. So right now we've got 4 community coordinators out in our neighborhoods. Well, they're starting in Salem Square neighborhood, but they're going to be spreading out around the city. And when we were at the Trey and Boo Classic, Felicia Dennis, who does the karate program over at the Championship Community Center and is also she works for the city also as a community coordinator, she started asking the 16-year-olds, hey, what could we do? You know, so we're talking about dances, we're talking about, you know, hip-hop shows, we're talking about talent shows. So we're trying to come up with some ideas to give them alternative stuff to keep them busy, so maybe they wouldn't be so bored that they'd want to stay out all night. Maybe, you know, you always, if you're a parent, my child is going on 4 years old, and you know, if you can tire her out early, then hopefully she'll be ready for bed. Now, I know kids want to stay out and stuff, but we are trying to figure out more things that we can do in the community to redirect the kids into some constructive stuff.
Yeah, I understand that. It's like, and the funding too. The last thing is, I wanted to say something. I couldn't get through, but I wanted to say something while the chief was there. I was going to say the thing is, and I know he understands this. It's more of a disconnect, and I think that one of the things that I don't be hearing is that sometimes some of the policemen have to give a little bit more of their time to get the children to understand that they're not that type of enemy that is portrayed. And I think that it was funny because it was a Facebook post where the policeman was playing basketball with the children over on the other side of the park. And the thing is, if they instill or give a little bit more of their time, because sometimes you got to give time of your time. You got to give of your time, not paid time, but of your time for these kids to really grasp or get a change of a mindset of that. And I think that'll be a part of the change as well.
That is something we would like to see, but I will tell you that the police officers, I think we've got 3 police officers out of 100 that live in the city. They've got their own kids and their own families to get back to, and it's very hard to get a lot of volunteer time. So we've been getting more police officers. We're encouraging them while they're on the clock to be hanging with the kids and talking more with people. But the volunteer time is really difficult to come by, I got to tell you.
And see, I think that that's a part of the growth. I think that if we become more mindful that we will have to, if we want to see the change in that community, even if you don't live in that community, sometimes if you want to see that change, then you're going to have to give that time if you want to see that change. And it's okay. I think it's okay that if, you know, you go home to your area and that's fine. But if you want to see the change in that community, in this city, in this city here, then they have to do that. I think that would be the change for the kids, and then that would be the change for the future. I just think that.
I agree.
Hey,
I agree.
Thanks for calling in, Bud, and hopefully we can follow up with you because I know you got some great ideas, and we're going to try to get some more callers in and keep this boat moving.
I apologize. Y'all have a blessed night. I apologize.
No problem, man. I don't know if we have any.
I think we
more
lost
callers.
we lost the other callers.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, we do have some wonderful guests in the audience that came out. We appreciate them for coming out. I ain't gonna say their names or whatever, but we appreciate you coming out. Do y'all have any questions? Yeah.
So my first question would be, but I guess it was for the chief.
how many of the shootings that happen at night or after curfew are violent? A bunch of shootings happen after curfew
Are violent or are juvenile?
are end in violence. Oh, any? No, I mean
So
he said sometimes it's somebody's car got shot or just any shooting is reported as a shooting, right? If somebody shooting the air, that's a shooting.
Are you trying to ask if it's game?
No. All right, I'm gonna skip that.
Yeah, we consider any shooting violent.
All right, I understand that.
Now, not every shooting results in a victim,
Right.
but every shooting is
How
violent.
many shootings that happens after curfew ends in a victim? Because there's quite a few that happens in broad daylight.
Yeah, well, our numbers are about 50% or more.
After curfew.
Yeah.
He said between 10.
Actually,
10
he
and
said
12.
most of them occur between 10 and 3, and 50% of the 50% of the victims of those are juveniles, and 50% of the folks committing the shooting are juveniles. So this is a way that we can try to protect those kids before they're making bad decisions. If we can maybe take them out of a bad situation, that's part of the thought process.
Now, are the officers that will enforce or patrol at night, are they getting, I keep hearing this year training, are they getting the same year training that every officer gets? Or are they getting some kind of special training?
Well, it depends. So when we were talking about the year training, we were talking about the folks that are coming on.
Right.
So they get a year worth of training and then they get 20 weeks in the car. But the officers get
But
trained on.
But the year training is that regular
Yes.
procedure?
Yes.
That any officer?
Right. Which includes curfew stops.
Well, two more questions I'm done.
Yeah.
Are any of the new officers from York City or York County? It's 18, right?
I can't answer that off the top of my head. I can say that none of the officers are from York City. However, one of the officers moved into York City. I believe right now we have 3 officers, including the chief, that live in York City, and that's the most that we've had in a while. So this is a huge problem that we're working on right now. We're trying to find ways. The chief has been going to the state and trying to figure out if we can get, when you want to become a police officer, you have to take these tests and you get special points. Like you get points for being a veteran. But you don't get any extra points for being from York City. You don't get any extra points for speaking Spanish. Well, both of those things are things that would be really helpful if you were a York City cop. It would be really good if you lived in the city. It would be really good if you spoke Spanish. So we're trying to figure out if there's a way first to get more points for those folks so they move up in our ability to choose them. The other thing we're doing is we're working with the York City School District on their new Public Safety Academy. So some folks have heard of the STEAM Academy over at Smith, at Edgar Foss Smith. This is doing a phenomenal job with these kids over at the STEAM Academy, but they want to do a Public Safety Academy so we can be training people that want to be police officers, firefighters, EMTs, other kinds of public safety assistants, and hopefully kids that are from here can grow up, learn those skills, and will want to give back to their city. So we are trying multiple different ways to recruit folks, but that is a huge issue. I agree.
Criminal justice at VOTEC.
What's that?
My daughter's taking criminal justice at VOTEC, so if I had one.
Now that's not the young lady that was that cut all her hair off, is it? Okay, we just had a young lady from York City that when I got my hair shaved at the thing for kids cancer, she cut off her locks that were down to here. She cut them all off because she was committed to being a police officer and wanted to go into the police academy. And so she's from the city, and we've been encouraging her. Hopefully, she'll be coming back here. I think she's going to go to college and the academy. I can't remember exactly, but we've got it. So that's another thing is we've got the junior police academy that we just had 6 York City youths graduate from.
So, out of the 18 new officers, one of them just moved in York County,
York City.
York City. Now, out of the 18, because this majority Afro-Latino community, are any of these 18 African American or Latino?
I can tell you of the 12, I can't tell you about the last 6. Again, I wish the chief was here for your questions. But of the last 12, we had 5 that were women or minorities. So that was the highest percentage of any hiring in modern times in the city of York. We had African American, we had, and I don't remember how many of which.
Because most
But,
of these people getting imported in, right?
yeah, well, like you said, they're all getting imported in. And we want people from York City to become police officers. We want people of color. We want Latino people to be police officers. We need them to be police officers.
Well,
I'm in the
Can we
same,
import them in?
huh?
Can we import them?
Because everybody, first of all, Spanish-speaking police officers are in the highest demand. So you're going to have other police departments that are going to be able to pay them more, and they're going to take that. Other people want diversity. So unfortunately, there are very few people of color that are applying for these jobs. And when they apply to a whole bunch of different places. So we've been actually going out like we're a kind of baseball or football recruiters. We've been going out trying to get people. When we see people that speak Spanish or see African Americans or see women, trying to diversify our police force. We are really trying. And anything anybody can do to encourage York City folks to become police officers or firefighters and then stay in the city, this is what we need to do as a community. It's very difficult for us to bring them in from the outside.
Do the officers have body cameras?
Yes.
They do?
Yes.
So, in this regular, even with this, nothing will change. They'll have.
Yes. So, for instance, the other day, when there was a concern on Facebook with a woman and her 2 of her children were stopped, I was able to go in. Now, we can't release that unless there's like a criminal trial or something like that, but I have access to it, and I was able to go in there and confirm that everybody acted appropriately. There was nothing fishy. Her kids acted respectfully, and it was an unfortunate incident. Somebody pulled over for something minor, but then somebody in there that was in violation of the curfew.
Okay.
But yes, there are body cameras.
All right. Before you ask your question, those who are viewing on Channel 16 Local Access TV will be signing off in 2 minutes. Thank you for tuning in, but we will continue for a couple minutes more on Facebook Live. So those on Channel 16 viewing, thank you for tuning in. We'll be signing off in 2 minutes, but those viewing on Facebook Live, we will be able to go a couple minutes extra. I believe, Mr. I won't say your name. You have a question?
Yeah, has the city ever considered, when the relationship to the police having a relationship with the community, something like, I know in Philly we had like a POW organization, Police Athletic League, where there were police officers whose actual details were in a POW center. And the POW Center offered different sports, basketball, baseball, football, and the different POW entities played each other in that particular league. So you had a West Philly POW, North Philly POW, South Philly POW. You had maybe 3 or 4 different POWs in that neighborhood.
So because we're going to be off on 28 seconds, I'm going to cut you off for a second. But the police athletic league is what you're asking about,
Right.
And I know in the past it has always been said that we couldn't do anything like that because we didn't have enough police officers. We've added police officers. I'm going to leave it up to the chief. But again, it's very hard to get voluntary. So you're talking about having them paid to be part of the athletic league instead of being out on the streets and stopping crime. It's a discussion we can have. I'll say that.
Right, and you could probably get it would be maybe a public-private funding kind of a thing, or just basically a private funding kind of a thing that would pay that particular, pay for that particular position. And they could do it like in a rotating. They don't have to be there for a year. I think they did it for like 6 months to a year in Philly, maybe 2 years at the most, and then they rotated out. Somebody else came in. So it was a rotating thing. They didn't just stay there, for their whole career. They were rotated out, so that they, had different officers coming through. And,
Yeah, got it.
So, I mean, that's maybe something you can.
Yeah, I looked into the Police Athletic League a couple years ago when somebody requested it. At that time, the answer, and again, I wasn't the mayor at the time, the answer was very, no, we can't do it. We don't have enough manpower, and people aren't going to do it voluntarily. So I don't know where we are now, but I'll go back and talk to the chief about that.
So we're still streaming live on Facebook. We got a couple more minutes on Facebook Live. If anyone has any questions, if you're looking on Facebook Live, you want to get it in now, because we're going to wrap this up in another 5 or 10 minutes. Do you want to talk about some programs in the city that could give the youth more to do to try to reduce them just being out past 11 p.m.?
Well, right now, the biggest thing that I need to do, and this is on me and this is on my community ecosystem initiative, we need to get all those folks in place. Once they are in place, then they'll be able to lead volunteers in the neighborhoods and try and organize volunteers in the neighborhoods and connect volunteers with other programs. I see Brant, who I know needs, you want to come up and do a plug quick? All right, well, Brant Kingsley is here with Pedal for Peace, and I know he could use a couple of skilled folks, kids that are, or people that are skilled with bikes and people that are skilled with kids. And he works out of the Championship Community Center, and I know he has asked me, I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds by putting it out there, but he could use help. Everybody could use help. If you're committed and want to volunteer, we've got, we're starting on work in the West End, but out there we've got the Yaya girls, the karate classes. We've got the Educated Voices of Hip Hop working on DJing and stuff like that. Has Peter been coming in? Yeah, the Shine. Peter Botros is doing the Shine music program. We've got so much going on, but it's really in its infancy. So we need more volunteers. We need more folks to learn about it, and then we need to spread this stuff all over the city. So the West End for us right now is just like the incubator. This is where we're trying to create everything that's going on, and then we're going to be spreading it next to the Hannah-Penn neighborhood, next up to the Northwest neighborhood. I know that Pastor Boxley is interested in working with us up there, and he's got like a workout room and stuff like that in his church. We've got stuff going on all over the city. We just need to work more together and build it all up.
Okay. I think, Brant, you had a question?
Yeah. Thank you for all the information you have given us thus far tonight. Because there's a lot of layers. There really is. You can keep just asking questions after questions after questions. But my question specifically is, the job of our officers, right? Is that to protect community or protect state? I'm trying to understand, what is an officer's job? Is it to just enforce rules, or is it to keep a community safe? Is what I'm getting at.
What they swear to is to enforce the Constitution and the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Their job is they are directed to try to preserve community by enforcing the laws. I will say, in my opinion, that there has been a shift that has occurred 100 years ago. The people in the neighborhood basically elected the person to watch out for them. They were the local sheriff or the local whatever, And now we have people that don't live in our city that are our enforcement folks.
So my question is when you say that their job is to preserve the community by enforcing, the Constitution, how can you preserve something that you don't understand? You know, that disconnect, I feel like, is something to be addressed, because this mayor could topple and go wrong real fast. You know, it could go right or left real fast if handled the wrong way, when really there's a lack of understanding in cultures. You know, if the only perception of African Americans or Latinos that they're getting is that they're seeing on TV or media, which we all know isn't the majority of how actions occur in these communities, you know, that's just the media end of it, then that's going to be their perception when they're handling and dealing with people. But if they were able to, I think it should be something that's almost mandated to interact with the community that you're enforcing the regulations of the Constitution in. You know, it makes sense to me. You're mandated to live inside the city.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
And what do? You're out talking to everybody in the city, and we support you.
But mayors, and thank you, but mayors, I don't know how many before me gave away residency and told the police they don't have to live in the city. And the union, I have talked to union officials, I've talked to former union officials, they are never going to give that back. So we can encourage our brother.
That was at the tongue, though. You just spoke deaf.
Huh?
They're never going to give that back.
That's negotiating with the unions. If we want to change that, we encourage our brothers and sisters, nephews, nieces, cousins to become police officers and become firefighters in the city of York where you live. We've got to do this as a community, because the system that is set up for us, called the civil service system, that doesn't do it for us. The only thing we can do is do it ourselves. So encourage your younger brother, encourage the kids that are pedaling with you, encourage them to say, okay, you don't like the way things are in the city? Then become a police officer, then become a firefighter. You don't like the demographics? Well, these are the demographics that we're getting from the civil service system that is skewed. It makes it very difficult for us. So we've got to do it ourselves. I want nothing more than to have a diverse police department and fire department. That, when you look at the employment of the city of York and you say, well, most of the employees are white. Well, guess what? Most of that is fire and police, because their percentages are so far off. So like I said, when we got 5 out of 12, we're like, we're moving the right direction. We're moving the right direction.
5 out of 12 as far as women, and we're talking Latino, and you know.
Right.
And, you know,
I know what you're talking.
Yeah. That's I just you know.
But we need. What I'm saying, it's an internal fight. We got to do this.
It may be something that never was plausible to happen before, but never is only a statement of a belief system. You know what I mean? You can implement and start something that's probable change, because you
Well, the only thing that I could imagine, I shouldn't probably even say this on TV or on Facebook Live or something, but you'd be trading much higher salaries for residencies, salaries that the taxpayers can't currently pay, because we are already so overburdened that we can barely afford to be doing what we're doing with the police that we have. So you're going to have to come up with a heck of a gem. Again, I've talked with union representatives from way back to recent.
Yeah.
And the word is, no, we won't do that. And it's not that they don't have good reason. From their side, they want to have a place where they can go where they don't feel like they're on the job. And historically, just like anybody that hangs out with me knows, you're always on the job when you are a public servant and you are hanging in the city. And the police officers say, look, I have to deal with some of the worst stuff, and they do. I mean, our police officers this past year have had babies die in their arms, have had to pick people up in pieces. I mean, horrible stuff happens, and they're the ones that go there. And they run to it, and they want a space that is away from it. And that's their argument. I'm agreeing with you that I want our police to live in the city, but I can't argue with what they say of why they don't want to.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Please.
You know, us as residents, we witness it's those same things and oftentimes go through the same thing.
Traumatized.
I know last year after Cherryville Classic, I was coming across the bridge and there was a guy who died on a motorcycle. I was the only one that catered to him, that put a blanket over him and watched him die. So, where do we go? To me, I feel like that's not an excuse. It's
Well-
not an excuse. There has to be some medium where police and us can meet each other. And more so, they need to meet us more than halfway.
So-
They need to show initiation.
Again, I'm going to speak as a surrogate, not necessarily my opinion on it, but when we have experienced trauma, which I have too on my block, it's most of us do not run to traumas constantly whenever there is a trauma. And these folks are spending their days running to the worst kind of situations and dealing with either people doing bad things or people that are just out of control. And I agree with you. Everybody in the city of York is traumatized.
Right. And then
You
there's
know.
a role into mental health. There's so much mental health that does not get
And
addressed, and that plays a role in everything.
and every one of us should be advocating for
That's
mental.
another one of the layers.
Every one of us should be
Right.
advocating for mental health services. I do every time I'm with the county commissioners almost. I'm talking with how do we get, because they have the county mental health system. You know, how do we get more mental health services into the city? We are the most traumatized folks in the county, but probably, I don't know for a fact, but I would say a lot of city folks either don't have access or don't even take advantage because of the stigmas about mental health services. They don't take advantage of the stuff that we have.
Let's excuse me. Let's go back and we get ready to wrap it up. Go back to the original question with Brant. With me, my undergrad being in criminal justice, this is statewide. Each individual in each community is responsible for their own safety. The police they are not bounded by law to even respond to a 911 call unless you have a special relationship with the police department. They really don't even have to come. My reference with that, you can get a book, it's called Dial 911 and Die. Everyone is responsible for their own personal safety to directly answer your question. And then you had mentioned it earlier about communities. We need to police ourselves. But law-wise, you could look it up. Everyone is responsible for their own safety, and the officers there are to enforce the law, not necessarily to protect any individual unless you have a special relationship with the police department, like being under protection or something like that. That's every state. But we have to police ourselves and take responsibility for ourselves and our children with the things that, with the community centers and all that, and the mental health. It's so many layers to this, and I'm hoping that, maybe some town hall meetings. I know you got a lot on your plate before this is actually enacted, that we can, extend this dialogue, maybe have some, just to let them know so they can have a more open dialogue to express concerns like the young lady there, Brant, and everyone else.
Well, anybody is welcome to contact me at any time. I have opened it up. This discussion has been going on for 2 weeks now, and I have made myself available. I don't know if it's going to be town halls, but I'm trying to get this introduced July 16th, because right now the laws that we're working under are extremely restrictive, and I'm trying to get something better on the books. But anybody can contact me at any time at mayorsoffice@yorkcity.org. MAYORSOFFICE. I don't know if Cliff has that handy back there. Oh no, we're not on anymore. That's right.
We're on Facebook Live.
We're on Facebook Live. But mayor's office at yorkcity.org, or you can friend me on Facebook at Michael Helfrich.
Would you be open to like a bigger forum for people to ask?
I would be open for meeting at council. We've just got a lot going on right now. We've got a council meeting on the 16th. We've got a forum on the 24th for community development.
Not the forum to pass about the curfew, is it?
Not on the 16th.
Right.
That when we technically, any change to an ordinance needs to be introduced. When you introduce it, there is no discussion about it. The discussion comes when the vote is actually occurring. So if a council member were to introduce this on the 16th, then the vote would be on the 20th, and the public forum would be on the 20th of August. I'd be happy to take any other information, any other comments.
If you don't get a lot of feedback from the community to city council members about changing the way that's worded, when are you looking to actually enact this? Well, it's already on the books, but make it.
It's on the
just
books. That's what I'm saying. What's on the books is it's active.
It never was deactivated.
It was never deactivated, and it is relatively harsh compared to the way we're living in New York City and in this country. I mean, this says the law says a grandmother cannot walk down the street with a child after 11. That's what this law says. What I'm proposing gives the possibility of others to be the guardians of the children. Because I
So
like
when
the
will
laws
that-
to actually be reflective of what we are trying to do. This is, to me, this seems like it's 1950. You know, when everybody's in bed by 9 and there aren't any stores open after 9, and you know that's not the life we're in now.
So if an officer sees the youth out past 11 right now, it'll be the way it is, not what you're proposing.
I have instructed the police officers. I made an executive decision to alter how the police are enforcing it. Right now, if you live in a house and you're 18 years, or you live in a house with a minor and you're 18 years or older, then you will likely get a warning. You'll likely get a warning. But the law still says that your aunt can't take you out, your brother can't take you out, nobody can take you out except for your legal parent or legal guardian. So if
Okay. All right. What time y'all have? 9:17. All right. We're gonna get ready to wrap this up unless we take one or two last questions.
I feel like, so I've been in York for about 15, 16 years as a resident, and I feel like that the mayor's office and the way it's going is more transparent than it ever been. I think, in my opinion. But, I mean, and so I always took you as a mayor of the city and the people, but you also the boss of the police, right? As a mayor, right?
Yep.
So as a mayor and being a mayor of the people and being the boss of the police, knowing that it's been so much lopsided, I don't know how to word it, I guess, injustice or racial profiling and stuff like that, as the mayor, what actions are you taking, or is it anything you planning on doing, or anything you planning on putting in place to make sure that your cops aren't just harassing or mistreating your people?
So
Where's
I'm
the
not,
accountability?
yeah,
That's
I'm
what
not sure
you're
if the folks
asking.
on Facebook can hear the questions when they're coming from the audience, but the basic question was, what am I doing to make sure that the police aren't harassing people, racially profiling? What am I doing to try and change a history that York has? And here's what I can tell you. Get me any proof of any wrongdoing like that, and I will be considering it. If you have an issue, we've got an internal affairs guy who I trust to be fair, and he will examine any claims. I can tell you this, though, opinions or claims without some kind of recording or something like that, it's like the court of law. You got to have something for me. The police, the police, yeah, the police have rules that they work by, and they are protected in their jobs by the union. I'm only allowed to take actions against a police officer if I can prove that action. And then, even if I prove it, the union can then take the city of York to court, and we have to prove it again. And we could, depending on the arbitrator or the judge, we could lose the case. So we are taking actions whenever we see anything. And here's the other thing folks don't know is that I can't tell you when we've taken an action, because now I'm talking about personnel issues. This whole thing came up a couple months ago with personnel issues. I can't talk to you about why people quit or why people are fired. I can't talk to you about who did what, because then they turn around and sue the city, and they cost all of us taxpayers money. So more money that we could have used for kids is now taken out because we're getting sued. So all I can say is bring me proof. And if you have a complaint, go to either call me or go to the Internal Affairs Inspector. His name is Mike Davis. He was Officer Mike Davis. Some of you may know him. He's a pretty well-known officer. He did the East Side for a long time. I think he's got a good reputation in the community.
I don't have really no disagreements with a curfew. I just think a lot of people in the community is going to feel like there's just another way to be profiled or harassed.
Well, let me tell you one thing. This one last thing. I know we're going to leave here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked to make sure that, and I give you truth, I give you facts. Okay. I asked for the racial demographics and the sexes of the minors that have been that have gotten citations so far this year or have been stopped. 58. 20 were females, 38 were males. Of the total 58, 15.5% were white, 36.2 were Hispanic, 48.3 were African American. Now, to figure out what that means in demographics, we go over to the York City School District and find out what are the demographics at the school district, so we can compare the racial demographics of general students or people in the city versus who we have given citations to. So the demographics of the school district, it's 12% white. So 15% of the folks that we've picked up have been white. So we're above average on white citations. 48% are Hispanic in the school district, and 36% got citations. So we're 12% low in Hispanic citations, and 32% are African American, and 48% of the citations went to African Americans. So we're 16 points above in African American citations. So we're above in both white and African American, and low in Latino citations. Now, what does that mean? Who's getting stopped? This is a short time period, but it's absolutely true that about 5 more African Americans got citations than would be average, and about 6 less or 8 less Hispanics got citations, and 2 more than average white people got citations. So because we know that the majority of the police officers are white, we do see a discrepancy between black and Hispanic, and we see a discrepancy between white and Hispanic. I don't think it is statistically, we're going to keep watching these numbers to make sure that things are not going in a biased direction. And if numbers keep going on like this, we're going to have to investigate. Why is it? Are there more African American young men out on the streets than Latino young men and young women? Maybe that's the issue. Maybe, I mean, we've got to figure this out. But all I can say is that we are keeping track of this stuff so that we know what's going on. So we're not just saying there's a bias or there's not a bias. We're going to keep data to make sure that we know.
But it's just been a history.
I know. And
And people have suffered, and the people are, what they call it? You know, just traumatized.
and skeptical.
You know what I mean? And
Skeptical is the word I was thinking
and
of.
skeptical about how this will all play out.
Yep.
And how it has been played
Yeah.
out.
So
But it's many layers
Yeah,
to
yeah.
this. Hopefully, you know, the mayor said he's open. Hopefully we can keep the dialogue going, but not just keep talking, but actually have solutions and close the gap. You know, we have a responsibility in the community. They have a responsibility, you know, so to speak, to, you know, be fair and not be targeting, you know, people and youth. And hopefully we can keep, you know, the dialogue going. Hopefully, you know, this is the start of us keeping it going and coming up with some solutions. So I thank, you know, those for coming out. Thank you, Mayor, for your you know, willingness to, you know, engage in the community. No matter what anyone thinks, you are definitely visible and on the scene. So I got to give credit, you know, where credit is due, and we just have to keep trying to close the gap. I forgot to give a plug to Studio 29. I was supposed to do that in the beginning, but they are open for soul food throughout the week, and especially on Sundays, 1 p.m. through 6 p.m. So that's Studio 29. So this is the Hour of Power. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Tune in next week, God willing, Channel 16 Local Access TV, and streaming live on Facebook. And thank you, Chief Banker, Mayor Helfrich, and Miss Elena Barnes for their insight. And hopefully we have shed some light and answered some questions. Thank you for tuning in.